Wonderful. So I'm assuming you can all see I'm shared correctly there, and you can all see my slides. If there's any issues technical, please just send a message in the chat or let me know if there's any kind of issue. So we're here today to give an overview of the Artform Support Services DPS procurement approach. My name is Laura Ivers. I work with the arts teams as an arts manager, but also I support internally in the Arts Council with project management for a variety of different projects. And one of them was the design and launch of this Artform Support Services procurement approach. So what we're going to look at today is a background to the Artform Support Services DPS, an overview of the arts teams and the roles that we procure through this system, and an overview then of the DPS itself. I'll then follow with a step-by-step guide to joining the DPS and give a little bit of a demo to demystify the labyrinth that is e-tenders for you. And then we'll do a Q&A at the end. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to put them in the chat now. I'll get to them at the end though. But if you want to keep note of it and not forget your question, you're free to add it into the chat. Okay, so procurement of contractors in the Arts Council of Ireland is completed in line with best practice for government procurement, with oversight from external procurement, legal and insurance advisors. So this can lead to very complex documents and lots of jargon, and we very much understand that that's inaccessible for a lot of people. So depending on the values of the contract, there's slightly different approaches for the services that we procure. If it's under 25,000, we do a direct invitation where we invite people to send us in a proposal. If it's above 25,000, which a lot of the Artform support services roles are, we go through e-tenders. If it's over 215,000, we go through the OJEU approach, which is even more complex again. So the Artform teams regularly procure advisory and assessment services, the value of which usually lies within the 25,000 and above bracket. So this involves managing all of those tenders through e-tenders on an ad hoc basis as the needs arise, excuse me, there's a typo there. And this process is seen as onerous and complex for the staff and often inaccessible and confusing for applicants. So the DPS approach was created based on advice from our procurement advisors to introduce improvements around contract and budget management for advisory and assessment work, governance of subcontracted assessors, standardization of our assessment practices, and improved general oversight of procurement in these areas. Additionally, one of the key goals of the DPS was to improve accessibility to these roles for all members of the arts sector, to ensure that we're including diverse voices at all stages of our assessment and policy development processes. So we have historically experienced that e-tenders and that previous process that we used to use was confusing, complex, inaccessible, very heavy workload internally and externally as well for candidates who were wishing to join it, which led us to this DPS approach, which I'll go into in a little more detail soon. So the Artform Support Services DPS, it covers advisory, assessment and research service procurement for the arts teams within the Arts Council, as includes architecture, arts participation, arts centres, CSAS, dance, festivals, film, international arts, literature, English and Irish, music, opera, theatre, traditional arts, visual arts, young people, children and education, and while there are many similarities in the team structures and the role definitions, there can also be significant differences, which might be related to Artform specific needs or assessment volumes in the team as well. So for example, some of the teams that have the largest volume of applications may have a lot more assessments to complete, so they may need a bigger team of assessors than perhaps a smaller team who may have somebody providing advisory services and assessment services being the same person, and they only have one person. So some of the teams have different structures in that regard. So as just mentioned there, you might have an individual doing one role, whereas another team might have a number of advisors who have niche expertise. They may not do any assessment, but they give advice on policy in particular areas. So with that in mind, the role definitions that we have outlined in the DPS are relatively broad, which allows flexibility for the teams at the mini competition stage, depending on their particular requirements for that service contract. So before applying to join the DPS, I'd recommend maybe having a look at the teams that you might be interested in working with, going to the Arts in Ireland page on our website, and you can see different policies and you'll see the details of the team members and things like that, just to give yourself a bit of a sense of what you might be getting involved with. So then within the DPS, we break down the roles in these ways. Advisor services, we consider this to be advisor service providers will report directly to the head of team at the Arts Council and will be responsible for the provision of Artform sector insights and industry knowledge, policy advice, and support for the selected arts team. This may also include the seeing of and reporting on previously funded work in the relevant arts sector. We say may also include here just to give flexibility, because for different teams, these roles may be different. Certain teams may want the person giving policy advice to be the person out in the field viewing work. Others may want the people doing their assessments to be the people out in the field viewing work. So there's flexibility there as well. Lead assessors report directly to the head of team at the Arts Council and are required to lead on funding application assessment for the selected arts team. They'll also be responsible for funding assessment team leadership and management of support assessors, if applicable. So if there is a team where there's very, very high volumes, or where there may be niche expertise required and they come in as support assessors, the lead assessor is also expected to, or will be asked to manage this team of support assessors, manage work flow, work plans, etc. May also include seeing of and reporting on previously funded work in the relevant arts sector. And then support assessment services. So these will report to the lead assessor and ultimately to the head of team at the Arts Council, and be required to support the lead assessor with funding application assessment services for the selected arts team. Again, may also include seeing of and reporting on previously funded work in the relevant arts sector. And then finally, we have research services. So research service providers report directly to the head of team at the Arts Council and are responsible for providing research services for the selected arts team in line with the Arts Council's central research framework, which is managed by our strategic development team. So if you have any questions around which of these roles might be suitable for you, advisor services will lean heavily on policy advice, so there'd be expectations that you would have a broad understanding of the sector, of the leading resource organisations within that sector, an understanding of national policy, an understanding of existing or past Arts Council policy, and also some understanding of international policy and best practices around that arts form. Lead assessment services would also expect kind of similar level of expertise and understanding of the arts sector, as well as evidenced skill and experience in written assessment work, research work, that kind of thing, that you would have the skills and competency to complete assessments in line with assessment guidelines. So for all of our funding programs, when we publish the guidelines for applicants, there is also a corresponding set of guidelines for assessment. So, you know, you will be assessing applications in line with those assessment guidelines. Support assessment services would require skills around completing assessments as well, but the same level of experience wouldn't necessarily be required. So if you're relatively new working in this area of the arts, perhaps support assessment might be more applicable to you. However, it would also, if you are very experienced, would also recommend if you're applying for lead assessment services or to join the DPS in that area, you may also want to consider throwing your name in the hat for support assessment services as well, as what could potentially happen is you may not be selected as the lead assessor, but the lead assessor or the team may need support assessment services throughout the year and will run mini competitions. So if you're not in, you don't win. And even though you may not get the lead assessment position, you might be able to find some work that suits you through the support assessment as well. Okay, so moving on, how the DPS works. Okay, so I'm going to, I'll talk through here on a high level. We'll talk through some of the documentation that's involved in it, and then I'm going to give you a demo of how to actually apply through eTenders. But on a very high level, to try and keep it as simple and digestible as possible, there are 2 stages to it. The DPS itself is going to exist for 10 years. So we're really trying to push for people to join it so that they're in their relative categories and subcategories and will receive notification directly then of opportunities and contracts that come up over the next 10 years in the area that they've applied to. So the DPS qualification is the first step. So you decide which category and subcategory or which role and art form you're interested in. So for example, lead assessment services for dance would be your category and subcategory. And you submit a brief application outlining some of your relevant experience so that you can join that lot. And then over the next 10 years, you'll be invited directly to apply to put in a proposal to complete contracts in that area. So you'll only need to apply to join the DPS once. You can apply for as many categories and subcategories as you would like to. You may not qualify for all of them, but you can apply. And if you don't qualify first time, we'll give you feedback and you can try again. So I'll just read through what I have here. Potential candidates apply to be members of the DPS under the desired category and subcategory. Example, lead assessment services dance or advisor services festivals. In order to qualify, applicants are required to meet the entry requirements, which we'll go through in a moment, through completing the template documentation provided. The relevant head of team will review the membership application and approve membership if the applicant has demonstrated sufficient experience for the role that they've applied for. Once qualified, applicants receive a letter confirming they've qualified, and then they remain qualified for the life of the DPS, which we're hoping will be quite long, for about 10 years. If you do not qualify, you can request feedback and apply again. So then once you're qualified into your lot, so for example, support assessment in Circus Street Arts and Spectacle, anytime an opportunity arises, and this could be throughout the year, particularly for support assessment services, we envision this category and subcategories will have, more as we see a volume of applications coming in, we might notice that we need a bit more assessment support. So we'll do a call out for maybe a lower value contract, more ad hoc, or for larger contracts, they could be for a couple of years, maybe an advisor or lead assessor roles. So as those come up, we run mini competitions within the lot. So everybody who's qualified in that particular subcategory will get a direct invitation to put in a proposal. So as opportunities arise within the relevant category, subcategory, qualified DPS members will be directly invited to submit a proposal. This will be evaluated internally based on scoring criteria, which will be sent with the invitation to submit a proposal for each of the specific mini competitions. So overall, it's in kind of two big steps. The one, applying to join the DPS in the first place, and then the mini competition as they arise. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a brief overview of some of the documents that you're going to come across perhaps as you're going through eTenders, just to kind of demystify what's going on here. The main document that we use or the main document that's presented at the start when you join eTenders and you accept the invitation to to put in a response for the DPS is the RFATP, and this is a large monster document, so I can understand it might be kind of overwhelming at first, so I just want to break it down a little bit. What it contains is, at the start, the first section is an overview of the DPS, instructions for qualification, a description of the roles, which is the exact text that I just used previously in my slide with the categories. It also contains a template DPS agreement, template contract, etc. So while it's a huge monster document, we're trying to give you visibility of the contracts and all of the other documents that are involved in the process very, very early on, so that there's no surprises later on. Then also you'll see the applicant response documents known as the A or D, and these are available through eTenders. So there's a unique template for each category: advisor, assessor, support assessor, etc. And you can apply for as many categories and subcategory combinations as you wish, but you must complete an A or D for each of these, and that will be sent on to the head of team. So we'll review it, the DPS team review it initially, just to make sure it's technically correct, everything's filled in properly, and then we set it to the head of team, who will review and say, yeah, they have all the skills and experience, let them into the DPS. And we tend to err on the side of admittance. We get a bit more we'll kind of grade things a bit sterner when it comes to the actual mini competition, but we tend to err on the side of admittance, so that there's as much diversity in the pools as possible. So these documents, there's one for each of the categories, and then you fill in each one for the subcategory. And we'll have a look at one of these a little later on as well. So this I know some people have gotten confused at this hurdle, but there is also an electronic European single procurement document, or EESPD. So this is completed through eTenders. It's not an external document. It's a checklist, a self-declaration checklist completed via eTenders, and it's just a procurement best practice checklist. It's quite simple to fill in, but I know it can be quite confusing, so we'll have a look at it later as well. So just while you upload your A or D, then you complete an ESPD through the dashboard before you submit. Then there's the DPS agreement, which is sent after you're qualified to be a member of the DPS. We'll send that out to you. We sign it on our side. You sign it on your side, sign and witness. And then it's basically an agreement that you are a member of the DPS, and you will be for 10 years, and that you'll get all notifications of all opportunities in the subcategories as well. So once you qualify, we send you a letter to say you're qualified, and then very soon after we send you a DPS agreement as well. And then at the mini competition stage, there is the DPS request for tender, which we will email to you via direct invitation, which is include a detailed description of the service requirements for this contract, the estimated days required, etc., which will allow you to put your proposal together. And then that proposal can be submitted with the tender response document, which has all of the grading criteria, and it's a brief. The tender response document is quite brief, and it really just has fields for you to fill in relevant expertise, how you would deliver the services, what your methodology would be, those kind of things. And then the final document is, of course, the contract. So if you're awarded the services, we'll work with you to sign and witness the contract and make sure we're all in agreement before you begin work with the Artform team. So moving on, and again, if you do have questions, make note of them and we can discuss them a little later on. So a note on insurance. Our insurance requirements are based on best practices for government and come to us through our insurance advisors and our procurement advisors. So there isn't much flexibility on this. However, they're kind of standard insurance requirements that we understand a lot of people working in these fields and in the sector already have in place. We don't require these insurances to be in place for membership of the DPS or even for submitting a proposal. We would need evidence of them before giving you a contract, though. So that's an important piece to remember, as well as tax clearance, etc. So this is pulled directly from the request for applicants to participate document. So the language is a little a little technical, but the successful applicant shall be required to hold for the term of any contract awarded pursuant to a mini competition insurances of the type and to the level specified in each mini competition. And we tend to go with this standard approach. So while these are the maximum that we might ever ask for, this tends to be the standard that is requested as well. Applicants should note they're not obliged to have these in place in order to enter into a DPS agreement with the Arts Council or the contracting authority. Applicants for the category support assessor services are not required to hold professional indemnity or public liability. However, lead assessors may be required to provide insurance cover for any support assessors on the team and to indemnify the Arts Council. So this doesn't mean that a support assessor doesn't let me phrase this correctly. This doesn't mean that a support assessor can't have insurance. They can. The reason we have this in here as a specific point is because there may be a case, and particularly in the very high volume teams where there's a lot of assessments coming through, support assessors might be kind of spun up on a very quick turnaround basis to do short contracts. And in those cases, it may not be financially viable for them to actually have those high levels of insurance in place because their contracts will be such low value. So to ensure that this is actually appealing to people who wish to maybe work in a more irregular support assessor way, we've put that clause in, and that can be discussed at a later point, be it mini competition and before contract is offered and all of that kind of thing. So just wouldn't get there's no need to kind of get bogged down on that point now. I understand it might raise questions for people, but it's pretty standard practice to indemnify an organization on insurance, and from what we've seen, it's not very costly. And also another point I think to make is when putting in a proposal for a mini competition, we expect that the costing that's put in that includes all expenses. So there's no separate expenses when working in a lead assessor or advisor or support assessor role. So we would expect that your costing, your daily rate, or however you present your costing, would include all relevant expenses, including insurance and including potential indemnifications if required. So that will be covered in that regard. So public liability to 6.5. Sorry, just let somebody into the meeting there. Public liability up to 6.5 million, professional indemnity up to 1 million, and then employer's liability is not applicable in this scenario. Okay. So now I'll kind of show a couple of slides that give a bit of a step-by-step guide to using e-tenders and the different documents, and then I will actually give a bit of a demo of it directly so that you can see it in action, and then we'll move on to Q&A. I think we may be way ahead of schedule, which is a good thing for all of us, I'm sure, but we shouldn't take too much longer. So the link to access the DPS for Artform support services is this link here. It's also available on our website. There is a page for Artform support services, and there's a link to the tenders listing for this DPS directly from there. If you all received an email invitation to come to this, there should have been a link in that as well. And that's the hub, the center point for all information around the Artform DPS. And we will be putting a step-by-step guide on that website, on that webpage, as well as this video recording as well, so that it's all centralized in one place. When you first come to the DPS page, you'll be asked to either log in or register if you haven't registered already. And then the supplier registration, you only need to fill in the fields that are asterisks with a red asterisk. For the type of business activity, there's a number of different fields there, but there is a service, or there is an administrative and support services field that I think is most applicable, but it's up to you which category you feel your business fits within. You need to put in your company name, your VAT number, organization number. If you're a sole trader, then your VAT number is your PPS number, I think. So the little question marks give you a bit more information on that. And you can fill in all of your details there. And then once you're registered, you can log in and reopen the the tender page. Once you've logged in, then you just need to accept the, so I guess the conceptual way it works is that the link is like an invitation to join the DP or to like to apply to join the DPS. So you accept the invitation to the RFT. So you click on accept, and then that will bring you in to a dashboard. The key places to draw your attention to in the dashboard are the access documents link. So this will allow you to see the AORD templates and the request for applicants to participate document, which are in there. And then the manage ESPD responses, that's where you complete your ESPD self-declaration. Then the attach documents button is where you'll add in your completed AORD document and the submit response document as well. So this percentage complete here will indicate that you're 100% complete, and then you are able to submit your response, at which point we will get a notification internally that you've submitted a response. We'll screen them just to make sure everything's technically correct, and then we'll send your AORDs onto the head of team to review and then get back to you to let you know if you have qualified to join the DPS or if there's any feedback, and then you can resubmit if you need to as well. Okay, so when you go to access the documents, if you click into access documents, you'll see this list of documents here. Oh, excuse me. Great time for the internet to refresh. Okay, we'll just maybe look at it out of presentation mode for a moment. So you'll see the list of all of the documents that are there. So the templates for category 1 advisor, category 2 lead assessor, etc. There's also a link to a webinar that we did when we launched the DPS. That webinar was more procurement focused. So this, I've tried to make this a bit more accessible, a bit less legalese as such. So this webinar will also be added to this list in due time. You'll find the applicant response documents, the AORD, and the request for applicants to participate document as well. See if this is working now. No, it doesn't want to present. Okay, so we'll stay in this other view. Then the ESPD side of things. So when you click on that previous screen, the dashboard, you'll get to open up the ESPD page. And if you're very confused by what this is and you want a bit more information into it, there is a guide, a PDF guide that the Office of Government Procurement have provided, and you can find that link in hyperlinked there. And I'd recommend you just focus on pages 17 to 27. So that's for suppliers. That would be for anyone who is responding. So really hope I'm not having massive internet issues right now. Apologies. Sorry. Typical. Okay, and then here's just a little screenshot of what that looks like then in practice, the different parts that you need to go through. And again, we'll have a look at this in a demo in a second. So then the AORD itself, and I have a version here for us to have a look through, but it'll ask you for a number of things. So the AORD, first of all, will look for your overview information, so your name, your company's name, and it'll ask you to complete which subcategory you've applied for. So for example, if you wish to be an advisor, for example, for festivals and for arts centres, you will need to complete a category 1 AORD and put in festivals here, and then complete one for festivals and then complete another one for arts centres, just to submit both of those, and they'll be sent on to the head of team. So the qualification requirements, there's a slight difference for architecture and for other categories. So architecture just has some very specific qualifications that you need to have to be a qualified architect, and then the other categories are a bit broader. And in this case, in the AORD, it's basically just a checkbox that you're saying that you have these things in place, and we're taking that in trust because it's a pass or fail criteria on membership applications. So we ask you to checkbox. So for example, a third level qualification in a discipline relevant to the art form, or there's asterisks here which are explained in the AORD document, which are, we can, if you don't have the third level qualification, but you have experience and expertise through independent project work or career work in the sector, then we can bypass that particular qualification. But it's just a quick kind of checkbox exercise. And then from the experience, you kind of expect a certain level of experience. Architecture, again, is separate, but here we have, at least 5 years experience working at a senior level within the selected art form subcategory in Ireland, etc. And then we ask you for 2 reference contracts. So what this means is 2 work positions that you've had, or 2 freelance contracts that you've had that demonstrate that you have the relevant skills and experience to complete an advisor, assessor, support assessor role. And we'll look at the document now in a moment as well in more detail. So once you've completed your AORDs, we ask that you upload those. And then once you've uploaded all of your documents, completed your ESPD, it'll show that you're 100% complete and you'll be able to submit your response. Okay, so I'm just going to do a little bit of a demo, just actually like clicking through things. So I've laid it all out there with screenshots. So I'm just going to kind of walk through that again with the e-tenders open in front of me. So if you just give me a moment now, and I'll pull up that screen. Okay. Now, so as I mentioned a little earlier, there's a dedicated page on our website for the Artform Support Services DPS. It will be updated again soon with more content, but what you can see here is it has an overview of what the DPS is, and it has the previous information clinic that we did in June when we launched the DPS. It then contains a link to e-tenders. So that link is here, and as you can see, it gives a breakdown of everything. It shows you the documents that you'll be able to access. But in order to access this, you need to either log in or go through online registration. So I'll just show you briefly the online registration. You select your type of organization. You select here, this is the categories that I was talking about. And I think perhaps if you don't align with any of the other categories that are there, perhaps the administrative and support service activities category might work best for you, company name, etc. And if you're looking for more information on any of the points, just have a click on the little blue check mark and that'll lay it out for you. And you only need to fill in the fields with the little red asterisks. And here in the description of business, it can be something very simple like arts management, advisory, research services, or whatever it might be. And then asks you for a point of contact, etc. And you set up a username and password then to join e-tenders. So I'm just going to log in here. Now, so I've already accepted this RFT, but if I hadn't, what this would say here is accept. And the reason I'm kind of calling this out is because sometimes people don't see the difference there and they're like, why can't I access the documents, etc. So you just need to make sure that you press accept first, and then that'll bring you in to your dashboard. Okay. So I haven't completed anything here. I've done nothing. So the very first thing I recommend that you do is you go to the Access Documents section. And depending on which role, if you already know which role you're interested in, if it's advisor, lead assessor, etc., You can click on each one of these. You may want to download as well, or you will want to download as well, the request for applicants to participate document. As I've said, just to warn, it is a monster document, but it's broken into different categories and sections and contains template contracts and template DPS agreements as well, just for your information. But the key things you might want to read through it are the very beginning of the document that explains how the DPS works, etc. And then Appendix 1 lays out the different roles and the requirements for joining, which are also in the A or D document. So you can click here to download your A or D document, and we'll have a look at, well, first of all, actually, we'll have a look at the ESPD side of it, okay? So when we click into Manage ESPD, here is where you'll see a guide to what the ESPD is and why you might need to fill it in and how to fill it in. So you can see slide 3 here gives an overview of what it is. And these all come from the Office of Government Procurement. So advanced warning, it's jargon heavy. But it is a standard self-declaration used in OJEU level public procurement procedures by contracting authorities, buyers, which would be the Arts Council in this case, and economic operators, which would be suppliers. It's to remove some of the barriers to participation in public procurement, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. So by completing an ESPD, we avoid even more onerous documentation and background checking and company audits and things like that that may need to be provided in order to have best practice procurement. So it is the best of a bad bunch. I don't know. It's the lesser evil. It's the lesser evil, perhaps, is the best way of putting it. So in order to fill it in, we select Create, and you can either maybe put in the RFT number, which is 215450. You can see it up here, or it might just say Laura Demo version. You can just put in your own name as well. If you're doing so this, you only need to do this once for the DPS, for the whole life of the DPS and the whole 10 years. And just one kind of overview point about it is a lot of it's already filled in. And if you read through it, it's automatically set that your answer is no in a lot of the cases. So we'll see, first of all, this is just some overview information about what the tender is, etc. And then we just say next. And then this is information about your organization that you would have entered. So we just make sure that all of that is in place. And in most of the standard answers to a lot of these is going to be no. So in that case, you can just have a scan through them. If there's anything you need to add, you can add it in, or you can say yes, and it will ask for more information, for example. But in most cases, the answer is going to be no. So then you actually don't even need to click on them. You can just kind of move through them. So obviously you should read through these, but the answers are usually going to be no. And so in that case, you can just scroll through, have a read through, and then save and next, save and next, save and next. And then you come to an overview. So this is just making sure that everything is correct. And then you put in the date, your location, and finalize. So you will want to have a read through and a broad understanding of what it is you're submitting, but in most cases, the answers are going to be no, which allows you just to scroll through and close it off pretty quickly. Okay, so we can see here, technically it's saying we're percentage 100% complete. However, we do need to upload A or D documents. So I'm just going to have a brief whip through the A or D template. I'm not sure if that is sharing correctly, so I'm just going to unshare and reshare just to make sure you're seeing the Word document. Okay. So here is a category 1 advisory services A or D document, and you'll need to upload an A or D for each of the subcategories and categories that you wish to apply for. So first thing, it kind of talks through what it is, gives you a bit of an overview. It says step 1, complete your ESPD, which we've done. And then it asks us to complete the applicant and company details here. So, for example, in the subcategory, I've put in Circus, Street Arts and Spectacle, or CSAS. This could be festivals or YPCE or arts participation or theatre or whichever of the art forms you're interested in providing support services to. And again, you need to have a separate AORD for each subcategory. So if you want to do advisor services for dance and advisor services for theatre, you need a separate AORD for both. Here you just enter in your company information as is applicable, any subcontractors that you might be working with, who are part of your team, though we don't really imagine this to be too applicable, because support assessors are invited to join the DPS directly themselves. So this is probably not applicable. And then step 3, we ask you to complete the selection criteria, which is on a pass-fail basis. So at this point, we don't ask you to provide CVs or anything like that. You will be asked to submit those later on when you're doing mini competitions, and they'll be kind of assessed and scored alongside other applicants. So in this case, the very first that you must confirm you have certain qualifications. So like I mentioned earlier, 3rd level qualification in architecture, you need to have very specific qualifications. So if I'm going for CSAS, architecture is not applicable, and I say yes, I have this either this 3rd level qualification, or if we follow the asterisks down, I believe they're further down the page here somewhere. Or where are they? Here somewhere. So you, excuse me, I've lost my place. Ah, yes, I think this is called out in the RTAFP, actually. That's why I can't find it here. So if you don't have a 3rd level qualification in the relevant discipline, just send us a message about that and we can have a conversation about it. Because we don't want to restrict anyone access due to them not having college accreditations. It's about the experience and it's about your expertise in the field, and that it's at a sufficient level to provide the services. So then you have your experience piece here, which is asking for, so we'll skip over architecture, but for example, if you're going into an advisor or lead assessor role, we would expect you to have at least 5 years experience working at a relatively senior level within the selected art form, and to be able to provide details of 2 reference contracts which demonstrate a developed knowledge and understanding of the aesthetic and artistic environments within the selected art form, nationally and internationally, a developed knowledge and understanding of the public policy and commercial operating conditions within the selected art form, and expert consulting skills, including advanced analytical communications and influencing skills. For the avoidance of doubt, it is not necessary for each of the 2 reference contracts to evidence 1 to 3 above, provided that both of them together do so. So then we would ask for you to give some details of these reference contracts or previous career positions. So for example, if I'm applying to Circus, Street Arts and Spectacle, I've given an example name of project here of, researcher on youth circus pedagogy and curriculum. You're working for Circus Ireland or whatever. Circus Ireland doesn't exist, but the Irish Street Arts Circus and Spectacle Network, for example, or whatever it may be. And then we ask you to fill in different pieces of information here, and then to do that twice. After that, then you sign and submit your document. It's important to note as well that you don't have, if you're submitting multiple AORDs, so for example, if you were submitting to festivals and art centres, your 2 reference contracts might both be relevant to art centres and festivals. So you don't need to have unique reference contracts for each of the AORDs that you're submitting. You just need to have a unique and relevant AORD for each of the ones that you're submitting to. So then once you've completed your AORD, you save it, and then we'll upload it to your eTenders dashboard here. So we go attach documents, and you can see demo here. So I've already attached it, but you can upload files here, choose your file, and then I've got my demo here, for example. You can rename it if you want. for example, if you wish to, just for clarity, or just leave it with its file name, and then you'll see that you've got multiple then you'll see that you've got multiple files there, and just click on done. We'll see 2 documents attached here. And then when all of that is complete, you submit your response. Okay, so I'm just going to pop back very briefly to the presentation. We're almost at the end, folks. Thanks for sticking with us. Great. So just to give you a little overview of what's coming up, we've already successfully, we launched the DPS in June, and through the DPS now we've successfully procured advisor and lead assessor services for architecture, as well as advisor, lead assessor and support assessor services for young people, children and education. So upcoming, we're going to have mini competitions running in January, February for art centres under advisory services, lead assessment services, and possibly support assessment services. Arts participation as well are looking for advisory services, lead assessment services, support assessment services, and the same festivals will be looking to procure services for advisory, lead assessment and support assessment roles. So if you're not in, you don't win. And I'd encourage you to put in membership applications. There will be upcoming mini competitions for other art forms as well. We just don't have the timeline set in stone for those. If you have questions, so we'll do Q&A now in a moment and I'll stop the recording, but if you have further questions or you'd like to have a call or you need a bit more support on actually submitting a membership application to the DPS, please feel free to reach out to the Arts DPS at artscouncil.ie email address. If you have questions specifically around the art forms and if the art forms are going to be procuring services soon or what that might look like, you can find the information for the Artform teams on the Arts Council website under Arts in Ireland, I think is the link. Yeah, and we welcome any and all queries. We really want to make this as accessible as possible. We're bound very much being a government body by having to follow best practices and use templates from the Office of Government Procurement, and our legal and insurance advisors are very stern so there's not a lot of flexibility that we have. However, we're hoping through clinics like this and through improved information on the website that we're able to make it very accessible and that we're able to provide support to those who would like to join. So with that in mind, I'm going to stop the recording and we'll move into Q&A. So you're welcome to turn on your cameras, put any comments you might have in the chat, raise your hand if you want to ask a question in person. But thank you for your patience and for joining our meetings so far.